try to use this microphone during the entire time that we're talking. The plan here is to give you an overview of what we're doing as interpretive planners with the Door County Coastal Byway, and then we want to get information from you about your community right here in Institute and the local region here. So we're going to start with just kind of an overview with this PowerPoint program, and we'll go from there. If you have any questions along the way, though, feel free to jump in. First of all, I should explain to you who we are.
We're here so that we can get on the camera.
Oh, okay. This is Dr. Mike Gross. Mike is a professor emeritus in the College of Natural Resources at Stevens Point. This is Jim Buchholz. Jim is one of our directors at the Schmeeckley Reserve, and I'm the director of the Schmeeckley Reserve, Ron Zimmerman. And with that, Stevens Point is a place that many of you are probably pretty familiar with. If you look at the map here, we're pretty much in the center of the state. You know where you are here in the thumb. We are all faculty members of the College of Natural Resources at the UW Stevens Point. We usually have a team, about 4 of us, that are doing a lot of interpretive planning work around the state, the country, and even worldwide sometimes. And we always like to tell people how to pronounce the name, because unless you knew Fred Schmeeckley or you're from Stevens Point, you probably can't pronounce the name Schmeeckley. The funny name is actually because we had a professor, Fred Schmeeckley, who was the founder of the College of Natural Resources, and the college is now the largest undergraduate program in natural resources in the nation. It's also the oldest conservation education program in the nation. So it's a well-known program, but very few people know how to pronounce Fred Schmeeckley's last name. We are now honoring Fred with the Schmeeckley Reserve, which is the larger part of campus. Actually, most of campus is the natural area. You can see it here. This is the Schmeeckley Reserve. This is the campus proper. And one of the reasons that we do all this consulting work, and we like to let people know that that's the reason we do it, is that this is state property, but it's unfunded by the state. So essentially, the entire budget has to be raised. So we have a lot of businesses. So every penny that we make on consulting jobs as interpretive planners and so forth, every penny goes back into the Schmeeckley Reserve and to our program there. We have approximately 60 university students that form the staff there. We have a visitor center that's open 7 days a week. So it takes quite a bit of funding to keep that place going and growing.
So one of the things that we do in order to provide funding for the reserve, we're actually not funded by the state at all. We get all of our funding through outside sources, and one of the ways that we're able to do that is through interpretive consulting. And so we've been hired on the Door County Coastal Byway to work with the interpretive master plan. And that's when we come in very early on in a project and help to determine what stories are going to be told along the byway and what are the best ways that we can actually tell those stories. Our goal is to have visitors have a positive experience when they're on the byway, so that they stay longer, so they come back, so they tell other people to come and experience the byway as well. And we're helping to do that within the interpretation. We see planning really as a process of consensus development. So we're not going to spend 2 days in Door County, go back to Stevens Point, work for a year on the plan, and then send it back to you. We're planning to be here a lot, so you'll see us again and again throughout the summer, spring, winter, fall. We try to come in all different seasons to see what visitors are experiencing at that time, to see how things change. And then we're working together with community members, with the stakeholders, with the board, and we're trying to determine why interpretation is needed, who interpretation will serve, and what are the significant stories that we'll tell. So just to give you an introduction to some of the different plans that we've worked on in recent years, one of them was at the Sanibel Captiva Conservation Foundation in Florida. We helped them to develop a new education center. They were outgrowing their old center. Another one we worked on was a private cave in Kentucky, the only cave that allows boat tours now. And this was a real interesting one, owned by a university, but they had private visitation, and the visitation increased so much that they needed to upgrade their facilities. So we helped them to develop a trail system and a visitor facility. Recently, we've been working with Illinois Route 66, a national scenic byway that runs from Chicago to St. Louis, about 420 miles, about 90 different communities, and we're helping them as well to tell their stories and to come up with ideas. You'll see some of these ideas as we progress through the PowerPoint today. We also developed a conceptual master plan for an education and interpretive center for Rib Mountain State Park in Wausau. They're in the planning phases right now. We've been hired back to work on the South Denali Visitor Center project. We developed a master plan for them a few years ago. Now they're actually in the phase of creating a visitor center with beautiful views of Mount McKinley. That's the mountain that you see up there. So a real neat multi-million-dollar project that they're starting to work on now in Alaska for tourists from Anchorage. And as many of you know, we're also just finalizing the details on the Ridges Sanctuary Master Plan, where they're going to be developing a new education center in Bailey's Harbor. So we're just putting the final details on and should have that completed soon. Why develop an interpretive master plan? One of the main reasons, especially for the Door County Coastal Byway, is that an interpretive master plan is required in order to become a national scenic byway. When you become a national scenic byway, it opens you up to all sorts of grants through the Department of Transportation that you can use for the byway area. But you have to have a plan in place for how those grants would be used. And so that's a real practical reason to have a master plan. But philosophically, interpretive master plan helps to guide the development of storylines along the Door County Peninsula that fulfills the organization's missions and goals. So what are the stories you're going to tell? How are you going to tell those stories in a comprehensive way that visitors will understand? It also does a lot of other things, though, too. It documents the entire planning process from the visioning phase, which is what we're starting on today, and we started last week, where we're gathering community input. We're taking a look at the why, the mission, the goals, the audience, the resources, and starting to develop that information all the way to conceptual design, where we create designs for potential media that can be installed along the byway. It's also a fantastic communication tool. Having something in writing, we can share that with community members, with stakeholders, and people can make comments and provide feedback based on that communication tool. It's fantastic for fundraising and marketing, not just for scenic byway grants, but also to provide to a potential donor to say, here's the justification for why we think we need this brochure or this visitor center or this exhibit, whatever it might be. And that's all written in the plan. And it also serves as a program for architects and other kinds of fabricators, different people that probably can't spend as much time on the site that we're able to spend in the planning process. There's a document that they can use in order to develop their ideas as well.
Well, what's the Door County Coastal Byway about? What makes it different than some of the things we've been talking about? Well, basically, it's a driving tour that kind of connects everything holistically so that when visitors come to the Door County area, they're going to develop a deeper appreciation for some of the meanings that are more obvious to people who are here for a long period of time. Many vacationers, even though they might come here year after year, miss some of the important stories, and they don't get the connections and the meanings behind them. Byway can help to attain that. This is a 66-mile loop, Highway 42 and 57. Most of you are very familiar with that route. Somehow tying those things together into a byway and a map allows people to better develop a cognitive map so they understand where they're going and what the attractions are and so forth. Some of the things that can happen is they have a more unified experience when they're here, just because the highway tends to tie those things together, at least in people's minds. Guides visitors to experience some of the significant features that they might miss if they weren't included in a lot of the information that's available on websites and brochures and other publications. And the idea is to encourage people to stay for longer periods of time, maybe come back during the shoulder seasons or to be here during the winter when they normally wouldn't think about coming up to Door County. When a national byway is set aside, and we're a state byway at this point, but shooting for a federal designation, they're looking for unique intrinsic qualities to the byway. So what makes it different from any other byway that you might travel? And of course, here you have a coastal byway, which in itself is unique. You have a tremendous amount of shoreline that people are seeking, almost 300 miles in Door County. You have some iconic architectural features that are associated with the water that are a natural attraction to people. And you have a lot of lighthouses that are available to people to visit even today. And of course, the one thing that's missed by a lot of vacationers here, even though they see rocks and cliffs and so forth, they don't realize the importance of the Niagara Escarpment, that it's a backbone for not only the geology of the county and the peninsula, but that it has deep historical implications and that it creates the character and the way people make a living on the land and how they treat the land. And of course, you have a long history of vacationers, of tourism in Door County, and the architecture reflects that, and there's some unique architecture here that's related to the resort era. An interpretive master plan is intended to guide the development so that all these opportunities and so forth can be included in as many possible ways as you can think of. In addition to putting together the master plan, we also are, as part of this grant, are developing 12 Experience Hub kiosks that will go in each community, the 7 communities plus 5 others. And those kiosks will have full-color panels in them, 4 of them, so there'll be 48 panels total. And this will help to create some unity from community to community as someone travels the byway, help them understand what some of the local stories are.
So one of the things we're often asked is, how do we go about the planning process? And this is part of the planning process that we're starting here today. And every plan is different, every place is different, every byway is different, and so it's really a flexible, diverse kind of process that we go through. So there is no recipe. But there are some questions that we always need to answer before we can develop an effective plan. That's the why, the who, and the what. We'll go over that in a little bit more detail by showing you a case study of a plan that we created several years ago for the Illinois-Lincoln Highway. This is another National Scenic Byway. It is the first transcontinental highway, all-weather transcontinental highway from the East Coast to the West Coast. It started around 1913, lasted into the 1920s when the numbered highway system took over the named highway system. Illinois has a significant portion of that Lincoln Highway, and so we were hired by them to develop an interpretive master plan. We'll kind of go through the process of what we went with for the Lincoln Highway. That first question is the why. What are the agency and organization's mission and goals? We're looking at both the written missions and goals, which are included right in the document, of course, of not just the partner organizations, but of all the communities that are involved, with all the other partners that are involved in the byway, to see what are the common threads and how can we set our limitations and also enhance our plan based off of those missions and goals. But sometimes it's the unwritten goals, those secondary goals, that are even more important to a plan. So for example, for the Illinois-Lincoln Highway, we knew what the mission of the Illinois-Lincoln Highway Commission was all about, but some of those secondary unwritten goals were things like enhancing the economic development of the communities along the Lincoln Highway, which of course is very common with any type of byway planning that we're working on. And so having those things in our heads is important as we develop the plan for how to tell the stories. The second part of that triangle is the who. Who are the target audiences? Who are the people that are currently coming to Door County, and who do we want to attract to the Scenic Byway by having this additional interpretation? People are coming because of different reasons. They're seeking certain things, and oftentimes we don't know what they're seeking. We think we know what they know, but we don't have the tools in place to figure out exactly why they're coming to our byway and what they want to discover while they're on that byway. So part of the plan that we're going to be working on is identifying tools such as interviews and focus groups and surveys to determine exactly what visitors are seeking and how we can enhance their experiences along the byway. The third portion of that triangle is the what. The site and the resources. What are the significant stories that we're going to tell? What are the significant resources that people are coming to see when they're coming to Door County? That includes both tangible resources, things you can see and touch, and intangible stories, those meanings that really connect to people on different levels. We see this as a holistic process, and that's why we spend so much time on these projects in the actual communities along the byway, experiencing the different attractions, because we really have to get a feel for who's coming to the attractions, what they're all about, and how can we enhance that through a holistic process of planning. The result of answering these 3 questions helps us to develop the plan itself. And part of that is, as we go through this process, we're going to end up with just an incredible number of stories. How do we organize all those stories? We use something called themes and messages, and that creates a storyline. What are the main ideas that we want people to leave with when they come to our byway? For example, on the Lincoln Highway, our main theme, our primary theme was the Lincoln Highway was an expression of the national yearning to link the nation from east to west as it ushered in the automobile era, providing autonomous travel that would shape the American economy and landscape. All interpretation that is done along the byway then fits within this primary theme. And so people are getting the same story in different ways with different aspects. Regardless of where you start on the byway or leave from the byway, you understand what that main idea is. That's the way that we organize the stories. So as part of the Door County Coastal Byway, we'll be developing a theme and message framework that different communities can use to develop interpretation. We'll also be looking at the best methods for connecting people to those stories, whether it's wayside exhibits or kiosks or brochures or audio tours or touch phones, whatever it might be. At the same time as developing a unified visitor experience along the byway. When you see a kiosk in one community, you know that that's the byway kiosk. When you go to the next community, you see that same kind of kiosk, that same design, and you know that the stories are going to be unified throughout while still honoring the uniqueness of each community at the same time. Some of the examples from the Lincoln Highway, we recommended several wayside exhibits, outdoor interpretive panels that would highlight the Lincoln Highway. The Lincoln Highway was always known for its red, white, and blue color scheme. They would paint the telephone poles, and that's how people would know they were on the Lincoln Highway way back in before 1920. So we kept that same kind of red, white, and blue scheme, along with a medallion that was used to mark the Lincoln Highway as part of these signs. And if we take a look at what was actually fabricated, Lincoln Highway is a great example because they were able to utilize a lot of the things from the plan to actually design interpretation. This is one of the wayside exhibits that they developed, and looks very much like the concept plan. Another concept that we recommended was to create a welcome center in Dixon, a place where people could learn more information and talk to somebody who understood the Lincoln Highway. These were the concepts for the exhibits, and this is what the actual exhibits look like in the Dixon Welcome Center. You can see some similar kinds of designs that tie the different media together. We also recommended a traveling exhibit where you can move it from one community to another instead of going to a single place. And this is how the traveling exhibit turned out. Again, you notice same kind of fonts, same kind of colors. We recommended a general brochure concept that people could take with them while they were driving. They developed this into a visitor's guide for the Lincoln Highway. We recommended that they paint murals on some of their buildings, historic buildings in town, to represent the history of the Lincoln Highway. And now every community along the Lincoln Highway has a mural that represents their unique community's history. And we also recommended some kiosks, Experience Hub kiosks, where people could find out more about the attractions in each of the different regions. We suggested a pretty elaborate looking 1920s kind of style for a kiosk. What they actually fabricated was a little less elaborate, but still has quite a bit of the same spirit with the ribbons and the interpretive panels inside.
We've been talking about an interpretive plan, so we probably should mention just show you a few examples of interpretation itself. Interpretation is essentially the attempt to connect people intellectually, emotionally, to the meanings of a resource, and that resource can be an entire peninsula, it can be an entire Door County, for example. It's a communication process, and it's something that guides visitors. We don't tell them anything because visitors come to every site with their own expectations. In fact, visitors come in all different kinds of groups. You might come socially with a family, or with grandchildren, or with a spouse, or you may come alone. You may come with a lot of advanced knowledge. You may know exactly how you want to use that resource. But when you go to a shoreline or a lighthouse or any kind of a museum, you're interacting with that resource. And what we do in interpretation is attempt to help people to gain insights and connections to that resource by providing them with additional information. It may be in the form of a person, it may be a guide, it may be somebody who takes you out on a charter boat, for example. It may be media, it may be a website that you access before you make the trip. It may be brochures that you pick up along the way, or it may be wayside panels that you see as you're driving. In any case, that media is intended to help people to gain insights, to learn something greater than what they would have learned had they not had that media available. When we look at any kind of interpretive issue, we usually look at the tangibles. You know, those are the material objects that you can perceive with your senses. It might be old buildings, it might be a lighthouse, it might be something very physical. It can be facts and information. The lighthouse was built in 1867, for example. Very concrete. You know, those old kilns that you see sitting in the woods today that are not being used. Intangibles are important, though, if people are going to gain insights and meanings. They're things that cannot be perceived with the senses. Concepts and ideas. We know that the lighthouses today are, for the most part, unstaffed. But there was a time when they were homes. There was a time when many lighthouses were pretty lonely, but they weren't necessarily lonely here in Door County because some of those lighthouses, like the Range Lights in Bailey's Harbor, were right there within the community. But those are all things that are abstractions. They're values and beliefs that you can learn a lot from that go way beyond what the physical and tangible resources might include. So we attempt to connect those tangibles with the intangibles, but first we have to do a good inventory of what's available out there as tangibles and also intangibles, the stories and the beliefs and so forth. We look for what's called universal concepts. Universal concepts have intangible meanings that have significance to almost everybody, but they don't mean exactly the same thing to any two people. They're the ideas, the values, the challenges, the relationships, the needs, and the emotions that make up the human condition. If you think of a good soap opera or a reality TV show or a movie or a novel, almost always includes lots of universal concepts. If you want to know about universal concepts, if you ask somebody like Johnny Cash, he was asked once, what makes for a good country song? And Johnny said this: I love songs about horses, railroads, land, judgment day, family, hard times, whiskey, courtship, marriage, adultery, separation, murder, war, prison, rambling, damnation, home, salvation, death, pride, humor, piety, rebellion, patriotism, larceny, determination, tragedy, rowdiness, heartbreak, and love, and mother, and God. Almost sounds like afterthoughts there, huh? Those are all things that people relate to, and that's what we look for in a good interpretive story. The facts are important, but it's some of those human elements that are the most important. This is a prototype of a sign that actually was created on Route 66, and of course it's a little more gaudy than we put on most byways that have to do with history and natural subjects. But on Route 66, there's a lot of chrome and so forth, so this whole sign is sort of aimed that way. In this case, we were interpreting a 1930s full-service station, and of course, it was about that time that stations were taking on their own architectural structure and so forth. Restaurants were being included in them, as it was in Sprague Station here. And we had all kinds of facts and information that we could tell about the station, its architecture and so forth. It's on the National Historic Register. But the story that really hit us as something we thought people could relate to is this story. This nice young couple right here, 10th time's the charm. In 1940, Walter Bittner was smitten with Irene, a pretty elevator operator who worked at a bank. Walter made excuses to visit the bank just so he could ride the elevator. Finally, he got the nerve to ask her out. He asked 9 times before she finally accepted. 10th time was the charm. She took a lunch invitation at the Triangle Cafe, and that was at Sprague's full-service station and restaurant. They married on May 17th, 1941, and in 2010, they were still married. And they said if the lady who had bought that and got it restored in time for a renewal of their vows, they planned to do their renewal there in the old restaurant. Good human story. It's something that most visitors can relate to. In this case, we have the longest running gas station on Route 66, 66 years. And we interviewed the owner and his wife. And he wasn't the first owner, but he had known the first owner. In fact, he had trained under the first owner. And I just have a very short snippet, because if you walk up to this particular panel, you push the button on the panel, and you get a message. And the message is pretty long, but in this case, we brief.
Phil Becker worked or owned this gas station for much of his life. Phil's dad was in the habit of handing out free candy to kids when they came into the station. Phil and his wife, Deb, explain how they settled on handing out Tootsie Roll Pops as a less expensive option to big candy bars.
The way it actually got started is that he was given candy bars. I said, we can't, I said, Dad, I said, we got to come up with something else different than giving candy bars away. Don't worry about it, kid. Then that's what he would say. Don't worry about it. It'll be fine. So I seen him doing it one day. So the guy come in with ordered candy and stuff. And says, like, we need something to give away. Dad says, Tootsie Pops. That's what it'll be.
So they gave away Tootsie Pops, and they gave them away for years at the gas station. And finally, when Phil's dad died and they had his funeral, they gave away Tootsie Pops at the funeral, because so many of the people that attended had been there as kids and had gotten Tootsie Pops at the station. We're looking for stories like that, stories like this. This is the Oregon Trail, another corridor, not a scenic byway, but a national corridor. It reads, rose about 5, had breakfast, got my housework done about 9, baked 6 loaves of bread, made a kettle of mush, and have now a suet pudding and beef boiling. I've managed to put my clothes away and set my house in order. May the merciful be with me through the unexpected scene. 9:00 p.m. was delivered of another son. Mary Walker, Journal, 1848. We look for authenticity. We look for real stories, something that happened right where you are. And of course, if they have a powerful message like that, all the better. And you thought you had a rough Monday, huh? There's lots and lots of universal concepts that are available in Door County. Already there's the historic Shipwreck Trail. People that run across those panels are made aware of something that they had no idea existed just off the shoreline. Those will tie into other interpretive media along the byway. And there's lots of opportunities for people to make connections. When you're passing some of these sites, you don't even know they're there. But if there's some panels, if there's some media that help you to understand the story, you get insights into what makes Door County special. the lime kilns and so forth. Most people have no idea what lime is used for anymore or what it was used for. They don't realize it helped build civilization. It was used for thousands and thousands of years until we came up with things like Portland concrete only about 100 years ago. We're going to be visiting lots of these resources, taking lots of notes, talking to the people who visit and work there. We're going to try to visit as many attractions as we possibly can that are identified by folks like you. And one of the things that's particularly important on this is to find out what makes each community unique. How is your community different than a community up the shoreline? And try to bring that out in not only the storylines, but in the experience hubs themselves.
So as Ron mentioned before, one of the more unique aspects of this planning project is not just the creation of an interpretive master plan, but we'll also be developing 12 experience hubs that get placed throughout the different communities along the Byway. So I thought we'd just spend a little bit of time explaining what an experience hub is all about. This is an experience hub that's found in Logan Canyon Scenic Byway in Utah. You can see it has a really interesting design that incorporates some of the stonework from the canyon, some of the timbers, and gives it a real rustic feel. When you first see that kiosk, you have an idea of what this byway is going to be about. So one of the first things we're going to be doing is working within the communities and working within the board to determine what is going to be a good design for these experience hubs that really represents Door County and the themes of Door County. But an experience hub is a thematic kiosk structure that serves as a starting point for exploring other significant sites along the byway. It's a starting point. The whole idea of the experience hub is to get people out to see the real aspects, the real sites that are along Door County itself. They do several different things. First of all, they orient visitors to the byway, which is a very important part. A lot of people are just going to stumble along the byway. They're not going to come here specifically to do the byway, but as they come to Door County, they're going to see the kiosks, they're going to stop, and they're going to say, oh, this looks like fun. Well, let's try this loop drive that's coming through. It's also to interpret the unique natural and cultural history stories of the region. Each kiosk is going to have 4 panels. One is going to be a map to the entire byway. One is going to be the cultural history of the area. One is going to be the natural history of the area. And the 4th panel are going to be the attractions that you can see within that region zone. The 3rd one is then going to encourage travelers to visit other byway attractions, which of course is very important. And these are going to be designed as being unified throughout the byway. It's very important. This is another one from Logan Canyon, and you can see the same elements within the panel and also within the design of the kiosk. So as people travel from one community to another, they'll know this is the byway kiosk. I know what kind of information I can get here. I'm going to stop here, learn about the attractions in this community, go to the next one, learn about the attractions in that community as well. Many different examples of experience hubs. In our heads when we think kiosk, we always have kind of a standard model that we think of, but different scenic byways have incorporated lots of thematic designs which represent the byway, from a maritime theme to a more rustic themes to a very historical kind of theme. This one's from Red Rock, Dinosaur Diamond. So all over the country, different kinds of kiosks represent the byways differently. And again, what we're planning to do is really work within the communities to develop a kiosk that will really tell the story of the site. Some different kiosks we've worked on recently. This is for the Illinois Route 66 Byway. Again, kind of a very unique stylized kiosk that wouldn't work anywhere else except for maybe Route 66 because of the 50s and 60s design, a lot of chrome, a lot of curves. This actually has lit up words along the side that change color at night. And so people can watch it change color for each community, and it becomes kind of a hub for them. We also have done more traditional kinds of kiosks. This one for the National Ice Age Trail at Hartman Creek State Park. And one that we just installed last summer. There will be 12 of these along the Green Circle Trail in Stevens Point. It's a 26-mile nature trail that encircles the area with native sandstone and rustic timbers. So a lot of different possibilities for design out there.
And now we get to the audience participation. This is the whole reason for having the meeting. I think it was said best by a famous American author, Mark Twain: get the facts first, and that's what we're trying to do. We want to get information from you guys. You can distort them later, Twain said. And I guess that's our job later. We have to interpret all that. But what we want from you is some information about your community. So what we've got in front of you on that page are roughly these same questions. What are some must-see places, things, or activities that visitors should experience when in your area? So in this part of Door County. And don't worry about, cutting off right at the township line or something like that. We won't worry about that. Second question, what stories about your area would you share with visitors? What are some good stories, some good facts about your area? And the third question, what documents, people, photographs, or other resources will help us learn about your community? So that centennial book, document that was put together, very helpful. But there may be some other historic documents. There may be some people that would serve well as resources that we should interview. Those are all things that we want to know about. So if you could, right now, if I don't have any questions, if you want to start jotting down some of those ideas, don't worry about the spellings or anything, and we'll try to have a discussion in about 10 minutes. If you want to take about 10 minutes to get started, and I'll wait and see how many people are looking up after 10 minutes, and if it takes a little longer, it takes a little longer. And then as we discuss these as a group, we like to do that because somebody may remember something that jars somebody else's memory, that gets somebody thinking along those lines, and that's very helpful to us. Any questions? Yes, sir.
Well, one of the reasons why I came here is the money, is it appropriated for this project already?
It is. It's part of a federal highway grant.
Okay, that's what I thought it was. That's what I understood it was. But now, where is that money appropriated from?
Federal highways in Washington. So it's federal highway money.
It's a government
It's a government program.
program.
The same money that would be used for other projects on highways.
Bridges and
Right, right. And by law, they take a certain amount and put it into the Byways program. And primarily, it's a way of developing some of the economies on some of these byways, particularly for smaller communities, I think.
Is this project designed to create some work or anything for the community?
Well, I think the idea is that a lot of this is going into marketing and so forth eventually, and signage, wayfinding, so that people will be able to find some of the existing attractions, be that museums or be it places like the farm right up the road and other attractions. So in a lot of cases, that would be private, small business.
Okay, and how many have we got designed for this county now? I heard 12.
12 of the hubs, and those will be provided as part of this grant. But we're putting together a plan that would go beyond that as well. So for example, when Jim was talking about Route 66, they're in the third phase. They've gone back and gotten 3 different sources of funding from both.
Do you feel this is a worthwhile project to the taxpayers of Door County?
Well, I guess I can't answer that because I'm just the consultant. Yeah. I'm the consultant that is paid to do the work.
Yeah.
And we do that work because we put the money back into our own program at Stevens Point. So we're kind of a small business in that way. But I can't answer your questions, politically or financially because that's not my role here.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. I understand. Yes.
If we have on Clark Lake, there's a beautiful natural area called Logan Creek, and it's at the boat ramp there. I don't think anybody putting their boat in really thinks about the ecosystem of Clark Lake. And for years I've been wanting to maybe work with Sevastopol School or somebody to develop a sign that lets people know, what they are entering. It's not just stay 200 feet from the shore at all times. A reason that might, actually motivate people to respect the shores of the lake. It's with something like that sign at the boat ramp at Clark Lake or at another place in this county that might be fragile, would an informational sign be something that your group...
We could make recommendations in the master plan for something like that, particularly since the Ridges is actually the manager of that property. And we'll be working with, entities along the byway trying to clarify some of that sort of thing so it can go into a master plan. And the beauty of a master plan is if you have something in that plan, it's going to give you some footing, some baseline data, so that later when you say, we want to put a sign up or we want to put something up that identifies that, you have reasoning for it. It's part of the logic of that master plan. So that's why groups like ours are hired to do this sort of thing, so that you can show this sort of long-range planning, so that when you go and try to find funding, be it from a private source or a public source or whatever, you have some kind of baseline to work from. Sure. Yeah, we're looking for good resources for the area. That includes not only places and objects and artifacts and must-see destinations, but also we're looking for documentation of good stories about the area. We're also looking for individuals that we should interview that could tell us more about the history of the area or give us insights into some of the aspects of the region. So we can be contacted through the Scenic Byway website, the Door County Coastal Byway, or you can contact us directly. We're at 715-346-4992. That's the Schmeeckley Reserve, which is part of the University of Wisconsin at Stevens Point. And we have cards available for anybody that's in the room today that you can take with you, and those are also available through your representatives in your area. So, thank you.